Thanks for tuning in. We're going through Numbers 14, and as we look back, God had given them the opportunity to go into the promised land. He was ready to bring them in, and they chose one man from each tribe. They came out, yes, Lord, it's just like you said. However, there's giants in there. And the 10 stirred up the crowds so that the hundreds of thousands became afraid and make accusation against God. They disregarded God despite all that they had seen and experienced. They were still held slaves and were captive to fear. And so God decides, hey, I'm just gonna start over, Moses. I'll wipe all these people out and we'll start over. And of course, last time we saw that Moses makes this beautiful intercession for the people. And he speaks to God as one who speaks to God face to face. He reminds the Lord in his intercession that it was his power. He recognizes that none of this had come about because they were a good people. They were a powerful people. It was all attributed to the greatness and the goodness and the promises of God. And he's the one who is forgiving of iniquity. He's long-suffering, or his mercies endure forever. And Moses closed by asking him to pardon because of his steadfast love. Now, beginning in verse number 20 is the Lord's response. He said, then the Lord said, I have pardoned according to your word. But truly, as I live, and as all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, none of the men who have seen my glory and my signs that I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and yet have put me to the test these 10 times, and have not obeyed my voice, shall see the land that I swore to give to their fathers. And none of those who despised me shall see it, but my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land which he went, and his descendants shall possess it. Now, since the Amalekites and the Canaanites dwell in the valleys, turn tomorrow and set out for the wilderness by the way to the Red Sea. So he's saying, none of these will enter the land. And what was the basis of the promise? He says, truly as I live, and all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. You see, I think it'd be easy to pass by and he's saying, nope, this generation isn't entering in to the land. Head from here and go to the wilderness. But the basis of the foundation was God's glory will one day fill all of the world. We wait for that day. We wait for the fulfillment when God fully rules and reigns in the world. And we know that was the purpose of sending his son, was that we could all be those who are filled with his spirit by grace through faith. He points out that Caleb was unique. Even though Israel had rebelled against him, he says 10 times They have rebelled against me. They've despised me. And what a tragedy to miss out on everything that God has for them simply because they couldn't lose their slave mindset. One day we know the Lord will return and establish his reign on this earth. But I hope that you realize that you do have a different spirit, a spirit that is alive to God because of the Spirit of God living in you by grace through faith. And while the law was given and could reveal the holiness and the will of God, it couldn't empower it. But that you and I, because the Spirit lives in us, have the empowerment to a life of obedience, a life of surrender. He's given us a new heart if we will only surrender and yield to his indwelling presence. We can experience all of the promises of God now. So then in verse 26, as it says, and the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, how long shall this wicked congregation grumble against me? I have heard their grumblings and grumble against me. I've heard their grumblings of the people of Israel, which they grumble against me. So say to them, as I live, declares the Lord, what you have said in my hearing I will do. Your dead bodies shall fall in the wilderness. And of all your number listed in the census from 20 years old and upward, who have grumbled against me, not one shall come into the land where I swore that I would make you dwell, except Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun. But your little ones, who you said would become a prey, I will bring in, and they shall know the land that you have rejected. He says, I'm going to bring in the ones you were worried would lose life because of a lack of faith. He says, none of you over the age of 20 will enter in. You'll all fall in the wilderness, but the ones that you worried about, that they would become prey to the enemy, I will bring in. The only exceptions would be Caleb and Joshua. So then again in verse 32, he says, but as for you, your dead bodies shall fall in the wilderness, and your children shall be shepherds in the wilderness 40 years, and shall suffer for your faithlessness until the last of your dead bodies lies in the wilderness. Now here's the difference between the old covenant and the new covenant. He says, because of your faithlessness, you will not enter in. But the promise in the new covenant, he says, even when we are faithless, he is faithful, for he cannot deny himself. Now, I hope that doesn't make you think that, okay, well, it doesn't matter if I'm faithless because God is faithful. Yes, in the new covenant, God fulfills the covenant even when we're faithless because he has united us to himself and can't deny himself. But you realize that as a born-again believer, you can miss out on the experience of all of his promises when you refuse to submit to his indwelling presence, when you reject him. He never turns his back on you. But you can miss out, and there are certainly consequences for our sins, even though he has forgiven us in advance for all of them. So then he goes in verse 34, according to the number of the days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, A year for each day. You shall bear your iniquity 40 years, and you shall know my displeasure. I, the Lord, have spoken. Surely this I will do. And to all the wicked congregation who are gathered together against me in the wilderness, they shall come to a full end, and there they shall die. And the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land, who returned and made all the congregation grumble against him by bringing up a bad report about the land, the men who brought up a bad report of the land died by a plague before the Lord. Of those who went to spy out the land, only Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh remained alive. Well, God's judgments, we know, are an expression of his love for his people. Sometimes it's difficult for us to understand how that is love, but he, I believe, understood at the very core that these people could never enter in. They could never cross the Jordan because they refused to walk by faith. And when we refuse to walk by faith, even as New Covenant Christians, God loves us. He favors us. He's paid for all of our transgressions. He's pardoned us. But we can miss out on all of the wonderful promises he has for us today because we refuse to walk by faith, hearing God and saying yes. Will you ponder it? And I hope you have a great day.